Okay, the first thing you're going to need to know in order to get going on music theory is what we might call the musical alphabet. This is just all of the notes that are available to us. And there's actually only 12 of them, only 12 unique notes, so it's really not that much to get your head around. I'm going to jump to a diagram of a piano keyboard here because it makes it a lot easier to visualize this stuff. So first of all, I'll point out where the A note sits on the piano. You see the black keys fall in groups of 2, 3, 2, 3, all the way up. And this note here between the upper two notes of the group of 3 is A. And it's the same everywhere up and down the piano keyboard. And as for the rest of the white keys, we just use the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And after G, we start over again at A and continue up again, B, C, D, etc. The distance from one A to the next A, or one D to the next D, is known as an octave because it's a span of 8 notes. And now let's look at the black keys that fall in between most, but not all, of the white keys. These notes are known as either sharps or flats, depending on the context. So this note here between A and B could be known either as A sharp or B flat, and this one between D and E could be called D sharp or E flat. So basically sharp means kind of like one notch higher, flat means one notch lower. When we put it in writing, sharp is indicated with what looks like a number sign or a hashtag sign, and flat is indicated with what looks a little bit like a lowercase b. And in fact, I use a lowercase b in a lot of the text on my website and in the PDFs that go with this lesson. And by the way, when a note is not sharped or flatted, it's considered natural. So when you put this in writing, the symbol looks like this little guy. And most of the time you don't have to call a note natural. You can just say a C, and it's assumed that you'd be talking about a C natural. You'd mainly use the phrase C natural for the sake of clarity, like in a situation where someone might be expecting to see a C sharp note, you might say C natural instead of saying just C, just to make extra sure that that person doesn't play a C sharp. Now you might notice that there's no black key between B and C or between E and F. So effectively, there's no B sharp or C flat, and there's no E sharp or F flat. Now I should say that those notes actually do exist, but it's kind of a rare esoteric situation where you get it. So for now, just remember that there really effectively is no B sharp or C flat, or E sharp or F flat. In fact, that right there is a super important piece of knowledge just to kind of keep filed away. Now there are various reasons why this note might sometimes be called D sharp and other times be called E flat, and for the moment it's not super important. Essentially a D sharp and an E flat are the same note and they would be played in the exact same spot on the guitar fretboard. There's a D, there's an E, and right in between those is either D sharp or E flat. But there are a couple quick things I can say about that. First of all, in most cases you're most likely going to use either sharps or flats and not both. So a given song is going to use one or the other, and there isn't usually too much mixing of the two. Like just about everything else in music, there are exceptions to this, but it's true most of the time. The other thing to remember is that it's typical, but not necessarily required, to use sharps when you're ascending, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, etc., and flats when you're descending, A flat, G flat, etc. So now we can spell out the entire musical alphabet in two different ways. One ascending with sharps, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, etc. And one descending with flats, A flat, G flat, etc. And when we run through all of these one at a time, even if it's just a segment of them, we call it the chromatic scale. I should also mention the concept of half steps and whole steps, which are terms that you hear a lot. The more formal names for these are semitones and whole tones, but I'm going to stick with half steps and whole steps for my terminology because it's more common and it really lends itself nicely to the guitar. So if we go from A to B, where we're skipping over this A sharp in between, that distance is referred to as a whole step. And if we go from A just to A sharp here, that distance is called a half step. And I'll remind you that since there's no black key between B and C, that distance is a half step, and the same goes for E and F. Some other examples of whole steps would be E to F sharp or B flat to C. Anytime you're skipping over one note like that. So now let's look at how all this tracks on the neck of the guitar. Basically, each fret represents a half step, and a 2-fret jump is a whole step. So if we look at the high E string, the open string is E. There's no E sharp, so the first fret's going to take us right to F. Second fret is F sharp. Third fret's G. G sharp, A sharp, B. B is going to jump right to C. C sharp, D, D sharp, and then E here on the 12th fret, and that's the octave of the open string E. And you notice the 12th fret is marked with a double dot on most guitars to help you visually identify that spot. And now just for a little extra demonstration, we can do the same thing descending using flats. I'll do this on the B string, and this time I'm going to start on the 12th fret, which is also a B note, an octave higher than the open string. And then we've got B flat on the 11th, A on the 10th, A flat, G, G flat, F. F's going to go right to E, E flat, D, D flat, C, and then C. There's no C flat, so we're just going to drop down a half step to B on the open string. By the way, I want to just make clear that it's not super urgent that you begin memorizing all of these notes here right away. It's more important for now that you just understand, first of all, what the possible notes are, and then secondly, how to figure out what notes are where using that process that I just outlined. And it's fine even if it takes you a few extra seconds. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So one of the most basic elemental things we have in music is what's known as the major scale. In a sense, it's basically ground zero. It's sort of your point of reference for everything else that we understand and talk about in music theory. So going back to the piano keyboard, the easiest major scale to start with is the C major scale, because it's the only major scale that doesn't have any black keys in it, any sharp or flat notes. You just start on C and just walk up from there, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and get back to C again. And it's a familiar sound, isn't it? Even if you've never picked up a musical instrument before, you might recognize the sound of a major scale. And you'll notice, by the way, that if I noodle around on a C major scale but finally land back on a C note, it really sounds like I've landed at home, like the period at the end of a sentence. And in fact, this is what it means to play in a key. The root note of that key sounds like home base, and all the other notes kind of have a sense of gravity that pulls you towards that root note. Now, you often hear people refer to the degrees or steps of a scale. So in the case of C major, we can call C the 1 or the root, and a more traditional or classical name for that is the tonic. And then D is called the second, E is the third, F is the fourth, G is the fifth, A is the sixth, B is the seventh, and then we get back to the root note again at the octave on that 8th step. At this point, I should briefly mention the concept of intervals. I won't go all the way down that rabbit hole right now, but here's a short explanation. So looking at this numbered C major scale, the distance from step 1 to step 2 is known as a second, step 1 to step 3 is a third, 1 to 4 is called a fourth, 1 to 5 is a fifth, 1 to 6th is a sixth, 1 to 7 is a seventh. There's definitely more to the story about intervals, but that's the main thing to understand for the moment. So let's look at something important about the major scale, the pattern of half steps and whole steps, which is really easy to see with C major on the piano. So C to D is a whole step, because we're jumping over this C sharp. D to E is a whole step. Then E to F is a half step, because there's no black key in between. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. And then it's a half step when you go back from the 7th up to the root again, C. So we have mostly whole steps with half steps just between the 3rd and 4th and between the 7th and the root. So starting from the root using W for whole and H for half, the pattern that we get is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And it's this pattern that's really the defining characteristic of the major scale in any key. So every major scale and every key has this exact structure to it. And in fact, that's why a major scale has a recognizable sound to it no matter what key it's played in. So if I pick a different starting point, I can plug in this pattern and figure out the notes in the major scale of other keys. One rule that I should mention, and this really is a hard and fast rule, is that every major scale contains some kind of an A, some kind of a B, some kind of a C. And of course, the A could be an A flat or an A sharp, right? C could be a C sharp, etc. There's one instance of each letter. So as a result, you're not going to have, say, a C and a C sharp in the same major scale. You might have a C and a D flat in the same scale, though. And likewise, you wouldn't have an E flat and an E in the same scale, where you might have a D sharp and an E. So let's start on A and plug in this pattern of half steps and whole steps from there. The first whole step takes us to B. The next whole step takes us to C sharp. Then we have a half step, which gets us to D. Now we have 3 more whole steps to E, F sharp, and G sharp, and then the last half step gets us back to A. So now we have the A major scale: A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And let's do one more, this time with a flat key. So how about the key of E flat? Start on E flat, have a whole step to F, a whole step to G, half step to A flat, 3 more whole steps now to B flat, C, and D, and then the last half step takes us back home to E flat. So the E flat major scale is E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat. It's actually really easy to track this on a single string of the guitar. So let's try the D major scale on the D string. So the open string is D, and then we go a whole step to E, another whole step to F sharp, half step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, whole step to C sharp, and then that last half step takes us back to D. Now, because the pattern of half steps and whole steps is the same for every major scale, that means the major scale is going to create consistent patterns on the guitar fretboard no matter what key you're doing it in. So an A major scale and an E flat major scale are going to create the same pattern, it's just going to start in a different place on the fretboard. Now, having said that, there are multiple different ways to play a major scale on the guitar, and I'm not going to get into all of those right now, but ultimately there's a finite number of them. You just have to learn a few of them. Once you have them down, no matter what key you're in, it's going to be the same pattern. You just have to know where your starting point's supposed to be. But if you do want to mess around a little bit with the major scale, let me give you one quick and easy pattern that you can learn here. This is just a single octave pattern, and I'm going to do it in the key of A. So it's going to start with your index finger on the G string, 2nd fret, that's an A note. And then you have B on the 4th fret. Then up to the B string, you have C sharp on the 2nd fret, D on the 3rd fret. There's that half step between the 3rd and 4th. And then we have E on the 5th fret. Jump to the 1st string, we have F sharp on the 2nd fret, G sharp, and A on the 5th. Now if I wanted to use that pattern to play, say, the E flat major scale, I just have to locate E flat on the G string. That's going to be on the 8th fret. And then we play that same pattern here. And we have an E flat major scale. Now, one thing I should mention here is that you'll just about always find notes in a given song that don't belong to the major scale of the key that the song's in. So just because a song is in, say, the key of D, that doesn't mean that that song's going to be limited to just the notes of the D major scale. It mainly just means that D is going to sound like home, but theoretically all 12 notes could be in play in a song that's in the key of D.